Good evening, everyone. So nice to see you all. Thanks for coming. I'm Olivia De Prato, and first of all, I'd like to thank Thomas Fichter and the SPANS Festival for presenting this very special project tonight. I feel incredibly lucky and thankful for having all my favorite artists right here on stage with me tonight, and it's beautiful that we all were able to come together. Yeah, I'd like to just briefly talk about the program and the project. Tonight you'll hear 5 pieces from my I Am Artist Motherhood project album that came out in 2023 on New World Records, and 2 pieces from my most recent album called Panorama that came out last year in April on New Focus Recordings. And just wanted to give a brief introduction. Since my son was born in 2016, I've been thinking a lot about artists, freelancers that build a career and spend a lot of time and energy for many, many years, and then the point comes that you think about starting a family and how to juggle all of that while you have a really busy career, and how to juggle the time and the energy, and how that changes you as an artist and as a creator and as a musician, composer. So I thought about this a few years after my son was born, and got together with a lot of my friends and talked about this more and more. It's a topic that is not talked about very much, actually. And so I thought it might be kind of interesting and fun to do a project kind of about that, like focused around that, focused on how motherhood has changed or not changed my artistic path, the way I think about music and art, and creating music and collaborating with a lot of artists. So after talking to some of my friends, they thought it was also a great idea, and I thought maybe they would feel interested in writing a piece for me for either solo violin or violin electronics. And so that's kind of how it started, and then I got the funding for it in 2019. I was very excited about get ready to start this project, and then the pandemic happened, and everything kind of stopped. And so that was kind of also a big factor in how these pieces came about, because instead of meeting and getting together and working on the music, we couldn't really do that. First of all, we couldn't really do that. We did it over Zoom, which all of us know now that is not an ideal situation. And so we still talked. We had meetings online, talked about the pieces, exchanged ideas. A lot of the pieces are focused on field recordings that that inspired us while we were kind of stuck in our lockdowns. And another part of it was we didn't have childcare. So our time as working on this project and being creative and having this moment to ourselves was very limited. So some of the pieces are kind of really based on like, oh, I have 10 minutes to go for a walk, and what do I experience now? And kind of recording that wherever we were, stuck in our worlds, all over the world, kind of. And then we would send these recordings to each other and improvise and make some music together. So the project got a little bit extended, but we were able to finish it in, so the pieces were written between 2020 and 2022. And then the other 2 pieces on the Panorama records were written in 22 and 23 and came out last year. So that's kind of a little bit of an overview of the project. I want to make sure that I have everyone speak a little bit about their pieces and their experiences collaborating. So maybe we'll get started with Hayang. How about? Do you want to say a little bit about the way we collaborate on your piece?
I sent you, well, the score, I think, just, and I had imagined it for the piece to be put together in the recording studio. And it was, oh gosh, I lost track how many multi-tracked violin stems there were, but numerous, many. And we initially discussed the piece before. The idea, the inspiration from it was And just the seed of it was my daughter was describing some dreams that she had been having at the time when she was about 4 years old, I believe, and where she was going into this jungle with these rainbows that would appear. And so I just kind of started with that, and then just kind of wrote the piece just inspired by that image. But and so, yeah, I just sent off the score to Olivia, and the piece was inspired by seven phrases that were somewhat loosely based on Roy G. Biv, and then she recorded it, and then I ended up spending a lot of time with an engineer in Austria, putting it together and mixing it. And then the version that you're hearing tonight is another version where it's mixed in 8-channel surround with ambisonic, and then I composed another live part for her to be playing, which will be brand new. That's a new part. So
yeah, so that's kind of like it's a premiere of your piece because it's never been performed live before, and the piece. And we haven't been able to work on the piece until this week, yes, because of the pandemic and because of the challenges of being far away. So really excited too. Yeah.
And I was in Seattle at the time, so the time difference was even more. I think it was like 9 hours or something. So sometimes she would be waking up and it'd be like midnight, 1 o'clock, and we'd just have to figure out how to work within those time zones. So.
And maybe not a cool thing to mention about your piece is that you have some percussion elements that were recorded actually in my living room by my son playing them. So.
Yeah, there's a few hand percussion sounds, and those are all performed by Leandro when he was like 3 years old or something. Yes. So those are in the recording as well.
Thank you. Who wants to talk next? Jen?
Sure. Is this on? Hello, hi. I was thinking I was going to be fourth. Have all this time to think about what has gone on. So the pandemic was just after Olivia suggested this idea to me. So I had started kind of the wheels turning, but then it really took a twist as soon as the pandemic started. So it was just a few months that I had some time to think about it. And that was a really important time for me because a lot of things changed at the very beginning, maybe March through May 2020. It was a huge shift for me in a really, really positive way. And it changed about everything that I think about. So from a compositional perspective, I really saw things in a new, fresh, even more present way than maybe before. So after some time talking with Olivia and coming up with some ideas and figuring out when we had space, my partner would take I guess he was also 3 at that time, 3-year-old out to play in the park, which we were lucky to be near. And one particular day, it was the solstice, the winter solstice of 2020. And that was another moment in time where I really wanted to harness the experience of being present during the winter solstice and to really just honor for a moment the fact that we depend so much on the sun and it's kind of taking a break right now, and this is our break point. And that day was so cloudy, so I thought, well, I still want to do a meditation to the sun. I'm going to do it anyway. So my son went outside and I got situated, sat in front of a window. I was like, okay, thank you, sun. And I just sat down to meditate, and suddenly I started feeling this bright light on me. I looked out and the clouds had opened up. So I was like, okay, this is the time. So I grabbed a recording device and sang instead of meditate, and took a moment to just, in that moment, was thinking of honoring the sun, honoring the solstice, honoring the earth. And from that recording, that began the whole process of kind of an understanding of what we could use that sound for and what kind of textures. So I started she and I kind of collaborated. She came over a couple times, I think, maybe, and we kind of tried
We did
things
actually
out.
meet, heavily masked and all that.
Right, we had the whole 9 yards going on, and like feet of distance and whatnot, and and it was it was in a way kind of magical that I didn't expect to see something like this lift off the page and become a piece in a really different way than I'd been looking at music before.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Natasha, you want to talk a little bit about your piece? It's also a premiere tonight, never been performed live.
So I guess I'll go back to talking about motherhood a little bit instead of specifically about this piece, because this piece is a little bit different than the other things that I made around this time. So I think something that I was thinking about when I wrote this piece was just about working with materials that are available to me because of this time constraint that we're all familiar with and talking about. Just kind of, I can't like conceive of this massive project and then gather the materials and then experiment with the materials and then go back and like gather more materials. It's like, okay, this is what I have and I have 15 minutes. Like, what am I gonna do? And so that's inspired the live version of this piece as well, where I really wanted to present these materials in this kind of way as though we had found these materials and assembled them and then made a piece together. And of course the piece is composed, so it's not completely honest, but that's the sort of feeling that I wanted to convey with this particular live version of the electronic piece.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Katie, want to mention?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny because in some ways our piece feels so much of that moment, and like I remember I had just moved to a new state, a new city. We were in this rental house, and I have like these very intensely ingrained memories of that house because we spent so much time there. My kid would like run laps around the house at like 7 p.m. every night, and like 100 of them, and I would like sneak into the bathroom and record this beautiful fan that would, when it rained, it would make this gong sound, and I was like hiding in the bathroom, So it was a very intense, like pandemic-specific moment. But it's interesting to think, 4 years later, about how parenting has changed or not changed, and how my relationship to work has changed, and music. And it's a lot of the same things of like just deciding that like this process is significant to me and hopefully to the people I'm working with, and like that's kind of the most important part for me, I'm realizing. So I think my goal in the piece was to make a process where Olivia and I could both like we didn't need an excuse, but like say like, now I have to go, gotta go work on my piece. I'm gonna take a walk. So to make the process a space through which we could take time for ourselves. And then to kind of see if I could make a piece in which even 4 years later, hopefully Olivia has space to express herself creatively and in the moment. So the last 2/3 of the piece are a structured improvisation. And that was a very intentional decision to kind of give the process of making music a space through which we can really kind of be ourselves. So
yeah, and it's beautiful because I feel like the piece has really changed over the past few years. Having that freedom inside of the piece. So yeah, it's beautiful. Samantha, you want to say a little bit about your piece?
Sure. So my piece was for Olivia's Panorama project. So I guess it doesn't have the motherhood theme. It kind of comes from the title is Balconies, which comes from the kind of point of inspiration for it, which was a large-scale drawing by the artist Agnes Martin. And this drawing has lots of parallel lines that are very close together. And when you look at it, it almost looks like they're kind of vibrating. They're so close together. And they're not exactly straight. It's like she's sort of drawn them to try and make them straight, but they're not quite. And so I was kind of interested in the perspective. So when you would look at it close up, you could see the individual lines and how they were drawn. But when you were further away, you kind of saw this sort of vibrating whole. And that was the starting point for the piece, was this idea of this shifting perspective of individual lines and then how those interact with one another to create this kind of this whole that's quite active. And the piece is for solo violin and multi-track. It's like it could be 5 violins, but the other 5 are recorded, so it's like multi-tracked. And these 5 lines are kind of interwoven very closely, sort of in a similar vein to the Agnes Martin.
Yes, thank you. And although the piece is not for the I Am Motherhood project, you're also a mother of 2 kids, beautiful kids. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about like just the way you juggle like time, composing, and and that's something that we all do.
I mean, it's an ongoing thing of adapting, and I think it's like just an extended part of being someone that's freelance that has many strands to their career, be that sort of teaching, being creative, and then there's this kind of other strand of wrangling small humans. So I feel like it's an evolving thing. As they grow, I'm having to sort of shift with it and be malleable and work around it and with it.
Thank you. Miya, would you like to talk a little bit about your? Oh,
can I use this one?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And when Olivia first asked me to do a piece for violin, I was so excited because there's so many possibilities of timbre and richness, and of course with the virtuosa, she's amazing. And I was also at Rome in the time when I created the piece, and it was a little bit post-COVID, but still very COVID-y. And I was staying in the same studio that Galileo Galilei had manifested his telescope to Rome, in the 1200s, and really was very going against the Catholic Church in the sense of challenging the idea that the sun is actually the center of the universe. So actually all that stuff was in my part of the ambience of creating the piece for you, because it was this richness and history of Italy, but also this Galileo's father was what would be considered now a composer, and he transliterated scales from the Greek scales, and at that time it was totally against what you were supposed to be doing, because there were very specific pitches that were allowed in the church, and so that was so interesting for me, that kind of activity going on, and I was also thinking a lot about space and three-dimensional space, and this research in Rome, this three-dimensionality of how space got invented, partially also in the Arab world and mathematics, and then how it became to more fruition, but in Aleshki and certain kinds of architectural drawings, and then how a sound component could be compared. Sorry, I'm taking so long. Sound component could be compared to that. So I was so excited about the different possibilities of sounds of the violin and your amazing virtuosic playing, and how different kinds of gestures, sound areas could be somehow dispersed even in a room, because there's these reflections and refractions everywhere. And so even though there's say maybe 2 speakers, there's still this really immersive component, and then working with the richness of your playing and all of the things that you do, the amazing things. It was such it was so inspiring.
Thank you. There were a lot of collaborative aspect in your piece as well. So I remember you sent me some score, and then like I would record something, and then we would Zoom, and you would write
the
something
Zoom
back,
things were
and
crazy.
You would change it
I
again.
know, it's like one thing. It's one thing to talk in Zoom, like to try to get someone's weight, like what they're talking about, get on their feeling of mood, but it's a whole nother thing to like say, can you make it closer over the microphone a little bit more towards the bridge? I mean, it was like, luckily, I've done so much engineering kind of stuff, but we were able, and you had such an amazing team, but yeah,
Yes.
to do that recording like that was
Sure.
crazy.
Yeah, did a lot of experimenting on drones and beatings and.
Yeah, because my piece is with sine waves, which is kind of like the basic element of sound. It's kind of the basic sound before there's any kind of anything on it. And so, in a sense, it's almost like when they show the wavelength of form, or in the medical in a hospital or a birth. Of going back to the motherhood thing. I like what everybody said about motherhood. I think it's so inspiring. My life's been defined by motherhood. Children are a big thing for me, so it's great to. Also, I come from a time period, a generation of when if you're a composer and you're a woman, you didn't talk about motherhood or your kids ever. In fact, you kind of pretended that didn't exist. And that's not professional to talk about children. Yeah. And it's not professional to bring in that stuff about, motherhood. So it's really amazing to have that, like, this open topic, because in my day that you wouldn't be taken seriously as a composer if you were to even bring it up, and let alone on a panel like this is so different.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point. In fact, during the pandemic, I also collaborated with Natacha de Castri, who also has a piece tonight, but she was not able to make it, unfortunately. But her and I and Alice Tissier and Alison Huggins-Lal, we all, four of us, we created this platform online called Matricalis. That's kind of a website, a platform for, we hosted a bunch of forums online, and we talk about motherhood with a lot of artists, and it's something that we keep on working, something that we can maybe improve. I've been talking to presenters and festivals and residencies. Last year was the first time in Europe that Jen and I had the experience that at a festival there was actually somebody there for our kids. Like there was childcare sponsored by the festival for the entire 10 days that we were working there, and that was one of the most incredible things. And we encourage more festivals and more residencies to have that, because it was amazing, and we could just drop off our kids and pick them up whenever we were done working, and things like that is something that it would be nice to work on more, kind of all around the world, really. Or I recently talked to a presenter also in Europe, just talking about how do we deal with traveling, or hotel, maybe having to book an extra hotel room for the babysitter or caretaker, and who can sponsor that? Maybe the festival can sponsor part of that, or have somebody on site that can help manage that. And I just remember when my son was a baby, just being really anxious and panicked, like having to travel, then trying to find someone to watch him, and then, taking care and going back and forth between rehearsals. And so, yeah, a lot of that. So if somebody's there in the festival, and presenters and venues can be supportive of that would be very, very helpful, I think, in the future. So we created this platform online called Matricalis, and we keep hosting forums and try to discuss this topic, and hopefully keep on working on it. As a last thing, I just want to briefly talk about my piece called Pezzettino. It's kind of, I jumped into cold water and was like, I'm going to write a piece for this project. And it was finished last week, and or maybe a few days ago, actually. But yeah, it's based on a children's book by Leo Leoni, an Italian author, that he wrote many children books, and this one called Pezzettino that I've read to my son many times in Italian. I speak Italian, and it's one of my favorite books, and I think it's just a beautiful story. And so that's kind of the background of that piece, and I hope you will enjoy it. And I think that's probably it for right now. We're gonna take a short break and go for the music at 7:30. And thanks again so much for being here, and yeah, enjoy the show.